Limnic Eruptions, the exploding lakes. You are standing on the shore of a beautiful, perfectly calm crater lake. There is no wind, there is no earthquake. But overnight, every single living thing within a 15-mile radius simply drops dead. This is a limnic eruption, one of the rarest and most terrifying natural disasters on Earth. Deep at the bottom of volcanic lakes, massive amounts of carbon dioxide gas slowly leak from the Earth's crust. Because the bottom water is freezing cold and under immense pressure, the gas dissolves into the water, trapped like carbonation inside an unopened soda bottle. The lake becomes a ticking time bomb. If a small landslide or a drop in temperature disrupts the water layers, the pressure is released. On August 21, 1986, Lake Nyos in Cameroon silently burped. In an instant, 1.6 million tons of invisible carbon dioxide violently erupted from the water. CO2 is heavier than air. It formed a completely invisible 160-foot tall cloud that rolled down the mountain into the sleeping villages below at 60 miles per hour. It silently pushed all the breathable oxygen out of the valley. 1,746 people and 3,500 livestock suffocated in their sleep. There was no property damage, the trees weren't broken, the buildings were untouched. It was a perfectly silent, invisible wipeout. Cover collapse sinkholes. The ground beneath your feet feels solid. You build houses on it. You sleep on the ground floor. But in certain parts of the world, like Florida and Guatemala, the earth is primarily made of porous limestone. Over thousands of years, slightly acidic groundwater silently eats away at this limestone, carving out massive subterranean caverns. From the surface, everything looks perfectly normal. A thick layer of clay and dirt acts like a structural bridge over the invisible abyss. But as the cavern grows, that dirt ceiling gets thinner and thinner. Without a single warning tremor, a crack, or a sound, the ceiling reaches its critical breaking point. This is the cover collapse sinkhole. In a fraction of a second, the Earth simply vanishes. In 2013, a man in Florida was asleep in his bed when a sinkhole silently opened directly beneath his bedroom. The entire room, the furniture, and the man were swallowed 100 feet into the earth, while the rest of the house remained perfectly standing. There is no radar that tracks them and no alarm that warns you. The ground simply stops existing. Clear air turbulence, the invisible drop. If you are flying in a commercial airliner and you see a massive dark thunderstorm ahead, the pilot flies around it. Weather radar can easily see the moisture inside storm clouds, but weather radar cannot see air. Clear air turbulence, or CAT, happens in perfectly blue, cloudless skies. High in the atmosphere, massive rivers of wind, called jet streams, travel at over 200 miles per hour. Sometimes the fast-moving air inside the jet stream violently collides with the slow-moving air outside of it, creating massive, invisible atmospheric waves and chaotic vortexes. Because the air is completely dry, there are no clouds to warn the pilots, and the plane's radar screen shows completely clear airspace. An aircraft cruising smoothly at 500 miles per hour can suddenly hit an invisible wall of sinking air. The plane can drop hundreds of feet in a matter of seconds. Unbuckled passengers and flight attendants are instantly launched into the ceiling with bone-breaking force. It is a violent, invisible trap hidden in a perfectly clear sky. Positive lightning, the bolt from the blue. Everyone knows you should take shelter when a thunderstorm is directly overhead. But what if you are standing under a clear blue sky, miles away from the nearest cloud, and you are struck by lightning? This is known as a bolt from the blue, scientifically classified as positive lightning. Normal lightning originates from the bottom of a thunderstorm cloud and carries a negative charge, but positive lightning originates from the very top of the massive anvil clouds, which can reach 50,000 feet into the atmosphere. These positive bolts carry up to 300,000 amperes of electrical current, nearly 10 times the power and heat of normal lightning. Because they originate so high up, they can travel horizontally through the upper atmosphere for more than 10 miles before suddenly turning and striking the ground. You can be standing on a sunny beach, hear absolutely no thunder, see no dark clouds, and instantly be struck by a bolt carrying enough voltage to vaporize metal. Sneaker waves. You are walking along the Pacific Northwest coastline. The ocean is calm, the tide is out, and the waves are only a few feet high. You turn your back to the water to take a photo. In complete silence, a single wave surges up the beach, moving 3 times faster and reaching 4 times higher than the previous waves. It sweeps you off your feet and drags you into the freezing ocean. This is a sneaker wave. It is not a tsunami. There is no earthquake. It is a product of mathematical constructive interference. Deep in the ocean, multiple different wave trains travel at different speeds. When the crests of these different waves happen to perfectly align and overlap at the exact same moment, their energies combine into one massive silent surge. There is no warning sound because it doesn't crash like a normal wave. It simply rushes up the sand with the force of a freight train. It kills dozens of beachgoers every year who mistakenly believed a calm ocean was a safe ocean. Subterranean coal fires. Underneath the town of Centralia, Pennsylvania, the ground is literally on fire, and it has been burning completely silently since 1962. Deep underground, a maze of abandoned coal mines ignited. Coal fires do not need massive amounts of oxygen to survive. They slowly smolder at temperatures exceeding 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit, eating their way through the massive veins of coal beneath the town. On the surface, it is eerily quiet, but the fire bakes the soil, releasing invisible, highly toxic carbon monoxide gas into the basements of homes. As the coal burns away, it leaves massive, empty voids under the earth. The town didn't realize the severity of the invisible disaster until 1981, when a 12-year-old boy's backyard silently collapsed, nearly dropping him into a 150-foot deep glowing red furnace. The government was forced to condemn the entire town, erasing it from the map. The fire is still burning today, moving silently underground, and is expected to burn for another 250 years. Dry microbursts, the invisible bomb. A microburst is a localized column of sinking air that drops from a thunderstorm like a bomb. When it hits the ground, it violently spreads out in all directions, creating wind shear that can reach 150 miles per hour. Wet microbursts are visible because they drag a massive curtain of rain with them. But a dry microburst is an aviation nightmare. In arid environments, precipitation falls from the cloud but evaporates completely before it hits the ground, a process called virga. The evaporation cools the air instantly. Cold air is heavy, so it plummets toward the earth at terrifying speeds. Because the rain evaporated, the sky looks completely clear. A pilot coming in for a landing sees nothing on the radar. Suddenly, the plane is slammed from above by a massive, invisible hammer of wind, pushing the aircraft directly into the runway. Before the invention of predictive wind shear radar, dry microbursts silently swatted dozens of commercial airliners out of the sky. Methane blowouts, the Siberian craters. In the frozen, desolate tundra of Siberia, helicopter pilots began noticing something terrifying. Massive, perfectly circular craters, hundreds of feet deep, were suddenly appearing in the permafrost. There were no asteroid impacts, no military bombs, and no seismic tremors. These were methane blowouts. For tens of thousands of years, decaying organic matter trapped deep beneath the permafrost has been producing methane gas. The frozen earth acted like a heavy, solid lid, keeping the gas trapped under immense pressure. But as global temperatures rise, the permafrost slowly thaws. The ice lid weakens. The methane gas expands silently, building pressure until the ground violently explodes outward. The blast ejects tons of earth and ice hundreds of feet into the air, leaving a massive, gaping void. They are entirely unpredictable, and as the Arctic continues to warm, these silent pressure bombs are arming themselves by the thousands. The Carrington event, the solar EMP. A disaster doesn't have to break buildings to end modern civilization. On September 1, 1859, the sun silently ejected a massive cloud of highly charged plasma directly toward Earth. This is known as a coronal mass ejection. When it hit the Earth's magnetic field, there was no explosion. The sky simply lit up with brilliant auroras as far south as the Caribbean. But the magnetic storm induced massive electrical currents inside the only technology that existed at the time, the telegraph system. Telegraph operators were severely shocked, and telegraph paper spontaneously caught fire. Today, our entire civilization is wired. If a Carrington-level event strikes the Earth tomorrow, it will be completely silent. But the magnetic wave will induce massive currents in the global power grid. High-voltage transformers, the size of houses, will instantly overheat and melt from the inside out. The internet, global supply chains, water pumps, and financial grids will shut down simultaneously. The sun will silently send humanity back to the 18th century in the matter of hours. Rogue waves, the wall of water. For centuries, sailors told terrifying stories of massive vertical walls of water that appeared out of nowhere in calm seas, snapping massive ships in half before vanishing. Scientists dismissed them as maritime myths until New Year's Day, 1995. The Dropner oil platform in the North Sea was recording wave heights in a standard storm. The waves were a predictable 39 feet high. Suddenly, the laser sensors recorded a single massive wave measuring 84 feet high. It was a rogue wave. Unlike tsunamis, which are caused by earthquakes, rogue waves are generated by nonlinear ocean dynamics. Energy from ocean currents and wind waves can randomly synchronize, stacking all their kinetic energy into a single massive, terrifying peak. They do not slowly build up. They emerge from the ocean in seconds, strike with the force of solid concrete, and dissipate just as fast. It is a silent mathematical anomaly that hunts ships in the deep ocean. Submarine landslides. We scan the fault lines on land constantly looking for the next big earthquake, but some of the deadliest disasters start in the pitch-black silence of the deep ocean. Continental shelves are massive underwater cliffs that hold billions of tons of loose sediment, sand, and rock. Over thousands of years, this sediment builds up at a precarious angle. A tiny tremor or even just the slow buildup of pressure can cause a submarine landslide. Deep underwater, an area of land the size of a small country silently detaches and slides into the abyss. There is no major earthquake for humans to feel on land, but the sliding sediment displaces a colossal amount of ocean water. In 1929, the Grand Bank submarine landslide off the coast of Canada silently severed multiple transatlantic telegraph cables. Hours later, a 23-foot tsunami arrived on the coast of Newfoundland, devastating communities that had absolutely no warning that the ocean floor had just collapsed. The silent avalanche, slab fractures. When you watch an avalanche in a movie, it usually starts with a loud echo, a gunshot, or a massive explosion. In reality, the deadliest avalanches are completely silent until the exact moment the ground falls out from under you. These are called slab avalanches. A massive, solid layer of heavy snow rests on top of a weak, icy layer buried deep underneath. You can ski across it perfectly fine, but the moment you hit the sweet spot, you trigger a microscopic fracture in the weak layer. This fracture propagates at the speed of sound, completely silently, across the entire face of the mountain. The only warning you get is a sudden, quiet whump sound as the air escapes from the collapsing snow beneath your boots. In less than a second, an area of snow the size of a football field shatters like a pane of glass and accelerates down the mountain at 80 miles per hour. By the time you hear the roar, you are already buried. Glacial lake outburst floods. High in the Himalayas and the Andes, massive glaciers are melting, forming gigantic lakes of freezing water. These lakes are not held back by concrete dams, but fragile natural walls of ice and loose rock called moraines. Because these lakes are located in some of the most remote, uninhabited mountain ranges on Earth, nobody is watching them. Deep inside the ice dam, water silently begins to tunnel through the microscopic cracks. The ice melts from the inside out. There is no warning siren. When the ice dam finally fails, millions of tons of water, boulders, and ice are instantly released down the mountain valley. The flood travels for miles, picking up speed and erasing everything in its path. Villages located hours away in the valleys below are suddenly wiped off the map by a massive wall of mud and water coming from a silent mountain peak they can't even see. Carbon monoxide inversions, the killer smog. In 1948, the industrial town of Donora, Pennsylvania, woke up to a thick yellow fog. Inversions happen when a layer of warm air moves over a valley, acting like a heavy, invisible lid that traps cold air and everything else down at the surface. In Donora, the steel mills and zinc plants kept running, pumping highly toxic sulfur dioxide and carbon monoxide gas into the air. Because of the silent temperature inversion, the toxic gas couldn't escape into the atmosphere. It was pushed back down into the streets. The gas is completely invisible and, in the case of carbon monoxide, completely odorless. The residents literally breathed in poison for 5 days. 20 people died and 7,000 were severely sickened. The sky didn't fall, the earth didn't shake. The very air they needed to survive silently turned into a chemical weapon, trapped by an invisible atmospheric lid. Meteotsunamis, the atmospheric wave. When you hear the word tsunami, you look for an earthquake. But a meteotsunami happens on a perfectly normal, earthquake-free day. It is driven purely by invisible air pressure. When a fast-moving weather system, like a squall line, moves over a shallow body of water, it brings a sudden, sharp jump in atmospheric pressure. This heavy air literally pushes down on the ocean's surface. If the weather system moves at the exact same speed as the water wave it creates, the wave absorbs the energy and grows exponentially. It is completely invisible on seismic monitors. In 2013, a calm, sunny day in New Jersey was suddenly interrupted when a massive 6-foot wave surged out of nowhere, sweeping people over a seawall. It wasn't an earthquake, it was the silent weight of the sky, pushing the ocean onto the land. Quick clay landslides, the liquid earth. In regions like Norway, Sweden, and Canada, the ground is made of a unique geological trap called quick clay, a relic from the last ice age. Under a microscope, the clay particles form a fragile structure held together by ancient sea salt, stacked like a house of cards. Over thousands of years, fresh groundwater silently washes that salt away. On the surface, thick forests grow, and modern towns are built on what feels like solid bedrock. But deep underground, the structural integrity of the earth is hanging by a microscopic thread. On a perfectly sunny, calm day without a single earthquake, heavy rain, or warning tremor, the clay reaches its breaking point. It instantly turns from solid ground into a flowing liquid. Entire neighborhoods, farms, and roads are carried away on a violent river of liquefied earth at 30 miles per hour. In 2020, in the Norwegian town of Ask, the ground silently gave way in the middle of the night, swallowing homes whole into a massive, instantly formed crater. The earth didn't shake, it just dissolved beneath their feet. Mazuku, the evil wind. We know volcanoes can erupt with catastrophic violence, but their most frequent killers operate in complete, undetectable silence. In volcanic regions around the world, from the African Rift Valley to the geothermal basins of Yellowstone, invisible vents in the earth continuously leak carbon dioxide and hydrogen sulfide. Because these gases are heavier than breathable air, they don't blow away in the wind. Instead, they silently flow down hills and pool into invisible, lethal lakes inside shallow ditches, ravines, and even residential basements. In Swahili, this phenomenon is called mazuku, the evil wind. A hiker can be walking through a perfectly beautiful, sunny landscape, step down into a slight depression in the ground, and instantly drop below the invisible waterline of a gas pool. There is no smell, no smoke, and no sound. The oxygen is simply gone. Animals, children, and adults are asphyxiated the exact moment their heads cross the invisible threshold, suffocating to death under a clear blue sky. The white squall, the clear sky hurricane. You are sailing on the open ocean. The sky is perfectly blue. The barometer is completely stable. The ship's weather radar shows absolutely zero storm activity for hundreds of miles. In a matter of seconds, a wall of wind exceeding 70 miles per hour violently slams into the broadside of your ship. This is a white squall. Unlike regular storms that announce their arrival with massive dark thunderclouds and lightning, a white squall forms entirely invisibly. It is a violent, highly concentrated downdraft of cold air that plummets from the upper atmosphere and rips across the surface of the water, atomizing the wave crests into a thick, blinding white mist. Because there is no heavy moisture in the descending air, there are no clouds to warn you, and Doppler radar cannot detect the wind until it hits the water. A crew has absolutely no time to drop the sails or change course. A perfectly peaceful day instantly transforms into a violent fight for survival as the invisible wind physically presses the ship into the ocean, capsizing massive vessels before the captain even realizes they are under attack. Hydrothermal explosions, the steam bomb. When we think of volcanic eruptions, we look for rising magma and warning swarms of earthquakes, but the most unpredictable zero-warning explosions on Earth require no magma at all. In geothermal areas like Yellowstone or New Zealand, shallow reservoirs of water sit just a few feet below the Earth's surface, superheated to well above the boiling point. The immense heavy pressure of the rock above keeps the water trapped in a liquid state. But if a microscopic shift in the rock or even a sudden drop in barometric air pressure reduces that containment, the laws of thermodynamics take over. In a fraction of a second, the superheated water violently flashes into steam. Water expanding into steam instantly multiplies its volume by 1,700 times. There is no seismic warning. The ground simply detonates. Thousands of tons of boiling water, scalding mud, and jagged rock are blasted hundreds of feet into the air. It is a massive, naturally occurring bomb planted just inches beneath the boots of unsuspecting tourists, triggered completely silently by a microscopic drop in pressure.